Peace. Today's math is knowledge culture, which is the numbers 1 and 4. The same way that 1 and 4 equals 5, knowledge and culture should translate into power, or it should manifest power. Today, I just took part of a dedication ceremony for a renaming of a public park, and it was done in order to honor a historic landmark that actually stood on that site over 100 years ago. That landmark was known as the Cataract House Hotel, which was a luxurious, world-renowned hotel, and its wait staff, which were all African-American men, led by head waiter John Morrison, operated one of the most sophisticated and successful networks in the Underground Railroad that this country has ever seen. So we wanted to rename this park Cataract House Park in honor of that historic landmark, as well as the history of that African American wait staff who operated that sophisticated and successful Underground Railroad network. Now, a lot of times when you see dedication ceremonies, or you see like ribbon cuttings, and you see people taking pictures at historic sites or landmarks that have historic markers there to tell you about the history that happened in that actual place. Some people may think it's just pageantry or pomp and circumstance, and that is nothing that is of real value. But there's power in this. When you think about culture or cultural heritage tourism, it's important to know that the acknowledgement and the celebration of historic sites and historic landmarks, and the acknowledgement of certain artifacts that were found in certain sites or in certain landmarks, is a quantifiable way to measure not only value, but to demonstrate the connectivity in terms of cultural heritage tourism. That has value. It has intrinsic value to it. Because we talk about historic sites or landmarks or artifacts, they happen and they have an origin in specific places. So here in the city of Niagara Falls, for example, is the only location where there was a Cataract House Hotel in the entire world. Although you can go to other places that can share history about what happened here, you can only go here to walk on the land and to see the actual artifacts and to learn the actual stories that are connected to what happened in this place. You can't go anywhere else to be able to experience that. And that has value to it. It has a unique value that cannot be duplicated. Every place in this country also has those type of assets in terms of historic sites, landmarks, and artifacts. You can only go to certain places in order to learn those stories and to experience those sites, landmarks, and artifacts. So when you see the celebration or the dedication of these sites and landmarks and artifacts, it's also an acknowledgement of assets on the map of human geography. And as you begin to build out content that is connected to those sites and landmarks and artifacts, you expand the potential for economic development as it relates to cultural heritage tourism. This is a conversation that I've had with a few brothers and sisters that are in my nation in the 5%, and how it's important for us to start documenting the sites and the landmarks and the artifacts associated with our nation, because it has intrinsic value. And the more that we are able to think in this regard and move that way in the future, not only does that give us the knowledge to protect our way of life, but it also gives us economic opportunities for cultural heritage tourism. And that's powerful, because the power in it is that it shifts the dynamics in the landscape where we live, especially when we have actual control of these sites, landmarks, and artifacts. So knowledge culture is not only about just knowing a way of life and there being power or influence in knowing a way of life. It's also knowing the value and the importance of sites, landmarks, and artifacts that are uniquely connected to that culture, and utilizing those sites, landmarks, and artifacts to empower ourselves as stewards of this way of life in order to protect it and preserve it and to perpetuate it through our future generations. So I will, this was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educational, and just gave those of you some insight into knowledge culture and its relationship to power, and encourage us to take another look at the importance of historic sites, landmarks, and artifacts that are connected to our people. Because if they're not in our hands, if we don't control the narrative that's connected to these sites, landmarks, and artifacts, then it's easy to be erased, it's easy to be forgotten, and it's easy for our stories to be minimized. Peace.